All right, thanks, Tom. Yeah, so my name's Kyle Rogers. I'm a biologist with the Ministry of Natural Resources and Forestry in Thunder Bay. And I'm going to, like Tom said, I'm going to give you a presentation on the state of Lake Superior's non-native salmonids. So just a quick outline of my presentation. I'm going to go over the history of non-native salmonids in Lake Superior, as well as some of the other Great Lakes. The fish community objective for non-native salmonids in Lake Superior. A quick overview of 30 years of stocking data of non-native salmonids, and a quick overview of some assessment programs that we have going on across the lake that assess these populations. And then finally a discussion and conclusion and some recommendations for the future. So, quick history lesson here. Rainbow trout and brown trout were first introduced into Lake Superior in the late 1800s. This was followed by Chinook salmon and coho salmon in around 1960 or mid-1960s. This is kind of the same story as the rest of the Great Lakes, as they were being used as a method for controlling exotic species. In present day, most non-native salmonid species are now naturalized in Lake Superior and are obviously providing an excellent angling opportunity to fishermen on both sides of the border. So the fish community objective for non-native salmonid species in Lake Superior is to manage populations of Pacific salmon, rainbow trout, and brown trout that are predominantly self-sustaining, but that may be supplemented by stocking that is compatible with restoration and management goals established for indigenous fish species. So keep this in mind while I'm kind of going through some of these slides. Okay, so before I get to the slide, I'm just going to talk to you about my color scheme because I've kind of kept it the same throughout the presentation, so it'll be easier to follow. So rainbow trout are red, splake are black, Chinook salmon gray, brown trout green, and coho salmon are yellow. And then there'll be a few slides with some blue, and those depict lake trout. So as you can see, stocking of non-native species in Lake Superior has been on a decline since the mid-1980s. If you follow that gray bar, it kind of follows that compressed look, whereas Chinook salmon are kind of been reduced to the point where in 2018 the only stocking of Chinook salmon will be by a club in Thunder Bay, Ontario, that is licensed by the Ministry of Natural Resources and Forestry. And then you can see the rainbow trout and brown trout stocking has remained fairly constant, and this is to support a localized boutique fisheries in Minnesota and Wisconsin. So Minnesota has a very popular looper or hatchery rainbow trout fishery, in Wisconsin a brown trout fishery. As I mentioned, in 2018 the only stocking of Chinook salmon will be completed by a private club in Ontario that is licensed by OMNRF. The reduction of stocking can be attributed to the successful natural reproduction of these species across the lake. Okay, so some of the assessment data that we have going on across the lake and that I've compiled for this presentation. So we have some lake creel surveys from Minnesota, Wisconsin, and Michigan that I've kind of combined into one. Ontario creel survey from Black Bay and to a lesser extent Thunder Bay from 2012-13 was 13-14. An Ontario rainbow trout cooperative angler program, Brule River, Wisconsin fishway data, a rainbow trout stream creel survey from Minnesota, as well as a Knife River fish trap or fishway survey from Minnesota. Okay, so these slides kind of depict what's going on from the creel surveys in the U.S. waters. And as you can see, lake trout is by far the most popular sport fish being harvested on the U.S. side of the border. It accounts for 68% of the harvest that's going on in that fishery. And this is followed by coho and Chinook. And then you can see the graph on the right-hand side. Everything's pretty constant. There's really no big surprises or fluctuations. Harvest has remained fairly similar for all species since 2012. So it's pretty constant, I'd say. So just to kind of wrap this up in a few bullet points for the U.S. Creel Survey. Lake trout remains the dominant sport species in the U.S. waters of Lake Superior. Coho and Chinook salmon contributed to over 25% of the angler harvest combined, but almost all this harvest is being sustained by natural reproduction. And then there is a localized brook trout fishery in Wisconsin waters. Okay, and so like I mentioned, we also did a access creel survey in Black Bay in 2013 and 14. And the reason I put this slide is I just really wanted to show how drastic the harvest is in comparison. So as you can see, Chinook salmon accounted for 72% of the harvest in this Black Bay creel. So this is, pretty polarizing from what we found in the U.S. waters. Okay, so the Ontario Cooperative Angler Program. This is a partnership between the North Shore Steelhead Association and the Ministry of Natural Resources and Forestry. And this program allows anglers to biologically sample their fish, and this data is used to, monitor rainbow trout populations across Ontario. And a handful of tributaries, fin clips are taken from the fish, and this allows us to derive Peterson population estimates. So this is some of the population estimates from streams. So the blue line on the top is the McIntyre River. The greenish line is the McVickers Creek, and below that the red line is Neebing River. These are all tributaries of Thunder Bay. The flattish blue line on the bottom is Portage Creek. That's a tributary of Black Bay, and then the one single dot above the blue is from the Cypress River, which is a tributary of Nipigon Bay. And as you can see, in the last few years, there's been some really strong peaks or increases in the population from Thunder Bay tribs, and this could be attributed to a strong 2013 year class that's moving through the fishery. In fact, this year class contributed to over 50% of the fish caught in 2016, so it's a really strong year class. Okay, so the Brule River Fishway, just pull this up. This is different colors, so I'll explain. The black is rainbow trout, kind of the hash lines is brown trout, and the darker gray coho and Chinook salmon. So the Brule River continues to be a very popular and important fishery for salmonid fish anglers in Wisconsin. The rainbow trout population has almost doubled since 2011, so going from around 3,000 fish to approximately 6,000 fish in 2015 and 16. And brown trout are not far behind, so this just proves this is a healthy and very important trout stream to anglers in Wisconsin. So the Minnesota Spring Fishery, this is a creel survey that's conducted by the Minnesota DNR on tributaries in the spring that following migratory fish. Kind of just wanted to show, even though Minnesota is stocking a fair amount of Kamloops strain fish, the predominant or the vast majority of the fish being caught in the fisheries or the tributary fisheries in Minnesota are still wild steelhead. And you'll also notice from 2014 to 2016, there's been a pretty sharp increase in the number of fish caught in tributaries. And again, this might be attributed to that strong 2013 year class that we're seeing in Ontario that's carrying over onto the state side. Finally, we have the Knife River fish trap or fishway. This is similar to the Brule River fishway or fish trap, in which Minnesota DNR operates this fishway in the spring and summer, catches migrating salmonids. And as you can see, it's pretty clear that since 1996, the population's taken an upward trend. So 96 is around 100 fish, and in 2016 it was up over 1,000 fish, with the vast majority, the dark gray line, depicting wild unclipped steelhead. So is the fish community objective being met? So again, the FCO for non-native salmonids was to manage populations of Pacific salmon, rainbow trout, and brown trout that are predominantly self-sustaining, but that may be supplemented by stocking that is compatible with restoration and management goals established for indigenous fish species. So other than some localized stocking in Minnesota and Wisconsin, populations of non-native salmonids are predominantly self-sustaining. These species are providing a valuable fishery to anglers while allowing us to reach restoration goals of indigenous species, as seen in the open water creel surveys in the U.S., where it appears that the main target fish was lake trout. So recommendations and features. We all really agreed that other than steelhead, we don't really have a great handle on assessing non-native salmonid populations. So in the future, if need be, I think we could probably do a better job assessing, say, Chinook salmon and coho populations. So with that, I can open up to questions.